Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining today's Masterclass Series Part 1, How to Implement ModelOps and Its Role in the Enterprise. We are extremely pleased to have as our speaker today, ModelOps Chief Technology Officer, Jim Olson. With that, I'd now like to hand it over to Jim.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the first in the series of 4 on our new Masterclass series. We just released a new week. That's what we'll be using. So if you hang on to the end, we'll actually be doing a live demo as a first look of the version 3.0. And we're going to be exploring in today's series a bunch about the kind of the high-level areas that ModelOps can bring to your organization as a conceptual item, then getting into some live demo on that at the end. And then that will be today's presentation. The follow-ons, we're actually going to dive deep, and those will be very, very, very hands-on. In that, we'll actually be looking at ModelOps and how it can enable model risk industrialization, and we'll actually show you how we can set that up, how we can build that, how that can be customized to your company, and kind of the advantages it will bring. The third masterclass will actually be more into model visibility across the enterprise. And we will actually talk more about that in today's presentation, what it is, but we're actually going to be showing you how you can actually prove the business value that your models are actually bringing to the business. And if they're not performing correctly, what is costing the business? So we can actually provide that kind of information. And then in the final masterclass in April, we will actually look at how we can actually consistently deploy models within the enterprise and then actually ensure they are performing correctly within the enterprise as well on that kind of thing. So I encourage you to attend all of these. As I said, the next follow-on 3 will be deep dives on the 3 categories we talk about today, where we get very hands-on, but we will be showing some live software today as well at the end of the presentation. And it's pretty exciting stuff because it's our new interface, new capabilities, and 3.0 has really brought a lot of things. If you've joined me in the past or seen the other ModelOps presentations, you're going to be in for quite a surprise as to everything that actually we have added in this release. So with that, what we want to talk about today is everyone loves to talk about ModelOps, MLOps, all these different things. We've talked in past about the difference between MLOps and ModelOps and how they are different, but we haven't spent a lot of time about, well, why do you do ModelOps? What does it actually bring as a value to your organization? Why is it important to do that? We've touched on some areas like risk in the past and things like that, and potential fines. But there's a lot of positives. Not only worrying about not getting fined, but there's things around it, like for instance, proving that your models are bringing value to the business. So, we want to be able to show that, hey, these models are performing. When they're performing well, they're providing this value. And when they're not, this is what it's costing us. So, we need to invest in those resources. And obviously, another big area of focus that ModelOps can help on is basically model risk and compliance. We've talked about this some in the past, but we're going to show you a whole bunch of new features that we've actually added to make that basically easier to understand. So not only managing the process, but what we actually can show to the business in doing that and that. And then finally, ModelOps, this is more like the DevOps role in traditional programming. Of course, there's a lot more to managing models and how they're managed than with source code. So there's the actual, the orchestration of how we get both traditional and AI models out into the business and how do we get them deployed so they do provide that business value. So we're going to look at these 3 different areas today in detail, but keep in mind they all interplay. They all kind of work together, and that's what ModelOps will provide, that you can focus on any one of these for your business and get value, and we can deliver just that portion. But over time, you'll find that, you want all of these. They actually all provide an underpinning that kind of works together. So when we talk about model risk industrialization, in specific, what we want to do is, we want to automate and scale model risk management. I think a lot of us are experiencing pain in hiring and getting the right people in place and actually getting, the kind of speed we need to market of these models and running them through a model risk platform. So a lot of times we're doing more with less, as we have people. So there's a lot of just kind of mechanisms you have to do to move it through the enterprise, make sure you get right assets and all that stuff. So we want to automate the drudgery part of it. So that data, the people actually doing the model risk assessment, when they're taking things from the first line to the second line, they get to do the parts of their job that really matter. All the stuff that can be automated, we will do that. So by the time they get it, they're providing their insight, their knowledge, and what their talents really are, and not spending times there. So to do that, we provide some fully automated model risk life cycles as examples based on SR 11.7a and things like that come out of the box, but they are modifiable, as you've seen in the past, so they can be adapted to your business and how you manage risk and interact with things you already have, as well as compliance reporting we can do out of the box, and also integrating with existing investments you've already made with MRM situations. Now, if you remember from previous items, the items on the left is an example of a model life cycle, where basically that's our automation process where you can drag and drop, flexibly change these to match your organization, but we have these out of the box. So when you see these diagrams, we're going to be working a lot with these in the follow-on sessions where we're actually going to go and build these out and look at what's behind these boxes and how they actually interact. So just wanted to provide a reminder that those items represent model life cycles. They are not just documentation. They actually drive the execution of the product and bringing all the pieces together and tying together your resources. So when we talk specifically about model risk, the overall goal is to actually reduce the complications in both the standardized testing. There's a lot of tests based on the type of model you're doing, whether it's a logistic regression, an AI ML model, or even a simple Excel spreadsheet. There's a lot of different kinds of tests you're going to have to run for model risk. So, we can help automate those and get the results so that they're there when you begin to do your actual work. You don't have to go run around and try to get these. And also, what often happens is when it goes from the first line to the second line, there's a lack of some of the requirements you have. So, for instance, you might not have baseline data. You might not have some sample data. You might not have, pieces where if you don't have them, you really can't assess the quality of the model that does that. So, you can see it as an example on the left where we can go through and make sure, hey, did they actually submit all these? And if they didn't, we'll create a JIRA back to the original user and say, hey, you need to provide X, Y, Z. Never even involved the second line. They didn't even have to get to it yet or look at it and that kind of thing. So that's some of the ways we can help, streamline and that process for model risk so you can do basically more with less. Another thing we do is out of the box, we actually provide data quality analysis where we can look for things like collinearity between columns or duplicate columns or, repetition or, a large variety of different tests that we actually can run just on the baseline data to make sure that, hey, this stuff looks good, and then forward those results along so you already have some of the legwork done when you're doing the analysis. Obviously, there's additional expertise that are important in the model risk team that we'll still do, but there's an awful lot we can kind of do up front to make sure they're there. And even if they don't pass some very minimal baseline items, again, we can send it back to the first line before it even gets beyond there and that kind of things. And then we actually can run standard statistical analyses in a black box methodology. We use this for both what we call standardized tests, which are run kind of up front before a model deployed. And then we can use many of these very similar ones or slightly different ones, but we have all of these just built into the product out of the box where we can run them as monitors. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on when we get to the orchestration, AI orchestration portion of our things. So in the second masterclass, what we're going to be doing is diving deep on this topic, and we will actually look at how we can use tools such as like Great Expectations, a great open source library that can basically put unit tests on data, for lack of a better term, and also standard statistical analysis on some of this, the quality of the data on that kind of things, where we actually do that. So we'll actually do that and actually build those out, and we'll run through those. And we'll show how that works with an actual real model. And then we'll actually look at how we can take both those standardized tests and Great Expectation tests and data quality analysis and insert them into a standard review document where, you can have all that stuff pre-populated, filled out, so you don't have to spend your time cutting and pasting, going and finding this result and things like that. Now, our tool will actually let you run these yourself if you want to ensure that they're they're valid, and maybe you need to change some things or something like that. But we can pre-populate those right into the solution up front and provide that situation. So we'll be doing that hands-on in next masterclass. And again, another thing, and we don't see this in very many products at all out there, but we think it's extremely valuable because a lot of people higher up running the business who may not be familiar with models and what they are doing for the business really need some visibility into what is this, okay, I'm paying all this money for this model risk, all this stuff. I understand some of them, but, we've got a ton of them out there. What are they providing to the business? And when they actually go wrong, what is it costing the business on that item? So here we actually are going to look into things where we've added an entire new dashboard where we can actually look at things like the business contribution, the return on investment they're actually getting out of these models, and whether these models are currently compliant, and if they need some attention on that kind of things, and how much they're being used, et cetera. And as I said, we're going to actually do a live demo at the end of some of this so you can see that what we put into that. We can actually drill down into every model so we can actually understand what's going on with that. And it'll actually be integrated not only with our system, but we can integrate it with other systems that are providing, things like just the health system, et cetera, and things like that. And we have one right out of the box, but more importantly, we've designed it so you can customize it because things like ROI calculations, that's different for every single customer. We understand that. So we've designed it up front to actually be customizable so you can get the right values you need in there and have them represented here, as well as provide custom. We refer to these little boxes as chiclets here, but it's like basically you can provide your own that you want, and you can see where you'll get value out of it immediately on that. So what we actually do is we have this idea of a standardized dashboard. It's a model itself. It's managed within our system and actually can be modified by you to take those in there. And then that gives us, a lot of flexibility because as I mentioned, the business value, that's a tough one. You can't out of the box do that. Like what does a missed prediction really mean to the business? So having that ability to be able to specify that kind of information yourself is absolutely critical to making these actually work. And, then we actually have those heat map values. You'll see as we have a bunch of those out of the box, but you will be able to basically flexibly define the criteria through decision tables of basically what should represent a red, a yellow, or a green value. And that can even be based on the category or other items there as well. And those same items can actually represent system health as well, like a response time. If your model is bogging down, if it's slowing down, et cetera, you may need some attention or some more resources or things like that it actually needs. And, one of the points of all of this is really to basically be able to, view what's it costing the business when this model goes down, or what does it mean? And so it provides both the positive view of the value you bring, but when you don't give it enough attention, here's what it's actually costing you. And we should invest in this area and because that's the difference it's bringing to the business. So it really provides that high level insight to the executive level of what is going on, where are their models, and as I said, we'll be showing a demo on that as well today. We're going to show both the model risk industrialization and this dashboard in the new 3.0 interface. And in the third masterclass, so that's on March 31st, what we'll be doing is, okay, what does a dashboard model look like? So how do we actually get that information from the model into ModelOps Center? How can you add your own custom fields that you want to represent? So how can you actually then put those custom limits as to what triggers a red, green, yellow, and what actually happens there and that kind of thing. So, we'll have that, as well as we'll also be looking at some of the compliance-related information and how we can manage the resolution of those across all of the models, and just have an idea of where we're at from that perspective as well. Because, of course, that's important to a higher-level executive as well, is, okay, we've got all this business value in the models. Are they acting within current regulations, et cetera, and things like that? So that will be a great hands-on one where we're actually going to be implementing our own dashboard model and show you how all that pieces together, because we're really proud of how we put this together in 3.0, because it's not so rigid. You're going to be able to reflect things that are important to your business, not just what is built into the system. So we build, that's a very large value add. So finally, we talked about AI orchestration. That's more when I think of dealing with models. This is the closest to traditional DevOps, where you're dealing with models. You got to move them through the process. You want a consistent way to deploy them. You want a consistent way to monitor them, and you really need to have that consistency in your organization, as opposed to a free-for-all of just throwing models out there and not knowing how to roll them back, refresh them, et cetera, and these kinds of things. So this is much more the traditional of what people first think of when they think of ModelOps on that. Well, to do that, we've worked with a lot of different customers and have a lot of different experience within organizations. And, we've talked about those model life cycles and how they're customizable and stuff. But we provide over 30 of them out of the box that you can just grab and use for kind of standards, deployment scenarios, et cetera, that we have seen in the real world. And, you can just tweak those as needed or use them right as is. A lot of times they meet your needs there. And, I want to point out, this is not replacing your MLOps tools. And your data science workbenches and et cetera. It's very much complementary to those. You can think of it as like your data science and MLOps tools are more for your experimental and development phases, where it's like an IDE for a programmer, where you're going out and you're just playing with a model. You're figuring out how to make it better. Perhaps you're hyperparameter tuning and all of those kinds of things. To where we actually think of AI orchestration. Those are all the phases where you're going to have rapid change, and many of them are never going to make the cut. They're not actually going to start providing business value. So, but when you actually determine that you have one or more that do provide that business value, how do you make sure that they actually get tested and get out to production and meet a certain quality level, et cetera, on that kind of thing? So it really establishes that consistent enterprise pattern for how you move them out into actually providing the business value that you get to look at in the previous screen that was there. Because if they don't get out there and get used, you're not going to get a lot of value out of them. So, and it also really enables IT to kind of reduce some of the shadow IT, but still giving a lot of freedom to the DS teams to get done what they need to get done. Because a lot of times water likes to find its own level, and you'll see that people have to be spinning up their own resources and stuff outside of IT, or using things that kind of get around the system or things like that. Well, our goal in AI orchestration is to reduce that necessity by providing everybody the tools they need, because everybody wants to work together, but it can get very hard in these kinds of hands-off to make sure all the pieces are there and in the right places, and it's understood what a model is even sometimes when you go between DS team and IT. So the goal of AI orchestration is to automate that process and provide the consistency. One thing I want to point out is, a lot of times when people think about deploying models, especially now, especially in the AI MLOps space, they think of just, wrapping a model in Flask and bringing it up in a Docker container, and now it's serving on a RESTful endpoint. And so it's deployed. Well, in reality, there's a lot more different kinds of deployments that we actually see. So one of the things ModelOps enables is that, we have our own ModelOps runtime with flexible endpoints. We've showed that to you in the past, and we use that. And that's an optional deployment methodology for more of that kind of model, where you're tying to REST or Kafka or those kinds of things for real-time responses. But there are an awful lot of Spark-based models out there running batch jobs on a regular basis too. So how do we deploy into actually Spark or SageMaker as an example? Even a deployment of a model can be to just push it into an artifact repository, because maybe it's going out to the edge. Maybe it's actually being downloaded to remote devices, and they're grabbing very specific versions. So the real deployment to us is getting it into the artifact repository and changing the current version to say, hey, if you want the latest and greatest, you come to this artifact repository. Is absolutely a deployment methodology, as well as a lot of companies already have a ton invested in their Jenkins CI/CD pipelines out there, and have a natural desire to have a strong barrier between their internal systems and their actual production platforms, and they use Jenkins to enforce that. So for us, triggering Jenkins jobs and doing that and firing that in, and maybe even in combination with that artifact repository to get the items out there, these are patterns for deployment as models and absolutely necessary for real world enterprise deployments. It can't all just be a Flask wrapped container. We need to support those. So we do, and we have the parameter, the model life cycles to provide those examples of exactly how to do that. And once they're out there, even if they're deployed just into an artifact repository, we need to be able to monitor them. So that's why we do black box monitoring and provide that out of the box, where basically, you provide us baseline data and most recent data and data samples and things like that and how to get to it. And we can actually execute those without ever executing the model, providing that black box monitoring, so we don't need it to be quote unquote running. It can actually be deployed in an artifact repository, and we can still examine how it's performing against more recent data and make sure we bring alerts and et cetera, and populate those heat maps you saw earlier, et cetera. And this is where all of them interplay and kind of tie together and really provide value to the business. But also we can trigger simple things like Jira tickets to resolve an issue or any of those kinds of patterns as well. So we have that flexibility and have these items already built out. And then we also need to monitor those runtime endpoints for the ones you do have that are alive and make sure they're actually up, responsive, performing correctly, and not having issues that we actually need to run. So on the fourth and final masterclass, we're going to explore this particular topic more in depth, and we're going to go into 3 different deployment types. We're actually going to look at how we deploy in a ModelOps runtime to Kafka, where we can actually monitor a Kafka stream. We're actually going to also show how you can build a Jenkins job to actually interact with our system, and our system can launch that Jenkins job and actually pass you information, and we'll track that Jenkins job and tie it back to the model. And then finally, we'll look at edge case style deployment, where we deploy to an artifact repository. In specific, we're going to be looking at JFrog's Artifactory and deploying out there. So things like it could be a pull from an NPM or any other style kind of a thing, that the artifact repository for edge-based deployment or multiple client-based deployment as well. And then we're going to look at, hey, now that we've got all those out there, what does it look like when we can actually have that consistent monitoring across those 3 radically different styles of deployment on that kind of things? And that's something we just haven't seen out there as well, that people are able to do and provide that kind of integration there. And then we will finally show how a lot of times if something is detected, like something out of compliance or something, you actually need to generate a standard exception report that actually gets tagged and lives with the model, and it explains what happened and why, and what items are either going to need to be remediated, or that, hey, this was an aberration and this is why, and it's not a problem, and that kind of things. And then make that live with the model, and we'll use our model document service to auto-populate that information, and we'll actually show you how that all works together again with any of these styles of deployment. So that will be quite interesting for anybody who has to actually maintain the health of these models and that kind of thing. Well, as promised, what I want to do is, if I can advance the slide. There it goes. I want to give you today a look. Just this week, just a few days ago, we actually launched our version 3.0 product. So we're going to give you a first look and a live demo of this today, where some of the big areas we've really invested in is that governance and reporting. So we're going to show you some of the compliance dashboards that we have, give you a brief look at that. Then we're actually going to go into some business value tracking, like how do we actually look at that. And then just give you a little bit over idea of that. We've really, if any of you have seen it in the past, we've really refreshed the user experience, made it a lot simpler for how we saw people using the product, while we still provide the richness and depth of information that we have in the past. So with that, give me just 1 second to share my screen here, and we will jump into the live demo here. Okay, so when we actually bring up the product now, you'll see this is live in here. We have a dashboard model running on this particular on this particular instance here, where we've done just a few items. So we have a few different example models, a German credit risk model, a consumer credit approval model, and an Enron communications model that we're actually doing. So you can see where we actually can track the cumulative value that all these models are actually providing, as well as the number of inferences that they're actually doing as well. We also track the number of models that we actually have currently in production. We track the state of the model, where it actually is, and we'll see a little more of that in a minute. You'll also notice that we have information about the individual models and what value they are providing, as well as the current status. As I said, this is the heat map we actually refer to, where we actually use a decision table that you can modify and define to set these limits of whether it's yellow, red, or green, or actually a large variety of colors, so you can use any colors you want on that kind of things and have it actually fair. But we provide some standard ones out of the box, things such as like the statistical performance or the data drift or the concept drift and things like that. So you can highlight when you see something is running wrong immediately. We can get to it, actually run right to those models and see the actual anything that's actually associated with that particular model in this case. So it's a great entry dashboard to where we can actually see that. So that's kind of your higher level executive view of what's actually going on. And of course, just like before, we support a large variety of models. So you can have Excel, SAS, PFA, Python 3, all different kinds of models. But we've really put some time into making you get some of the information that you really want up front. Likewise, we can see where the individual models themselves are actually deployed and running at this particular time. So we can see what stage they're in, such as what's actually deployed there, et cetera. But we even have a better view now of understanding what models are actually out in your business and what's their level of compliance on that kind of thing. So, we can see, we track things such as risk of the model. Now, this is determined usually early in the process as to what risks this model actually brings to the company. And we can see then the individual kind of different categories of models that actually exist out there, such as a compliance model and a credit risk model, and then the different items that we actually have there. And then we can actually tie that together with where they're actually coming from. I just have one business unit in my little company here. But you can see, for instance, at what stage they're in and what different number of models are actually in there. So, we have one high risk model in pre-production, but we have two medium risk models actually out in production. And then we can actually see the number of non-compliant models that are actually currently out in production. So what's my exposure? So we can actually see that we have this one model that's failing on a PSI issue and track this. So obviously this becomes more meaningful when we populate with a bunch more models, but you have that kind of idea. And then we have the idea of model expirations. Most models will have a shelf life, either because of regulatory reasons or they're machine learning models that likely need a retraining, et cetera. And, you can automate some of that, but still nice to know, well, where are my models? What categories are they in? And how many models are coming up? If I have a limited data science team, I'd hate to come in here and see that, I've got 20 models and they're going to expire in less than 30 days, that's a big red flag to me. And it's good to know that kind of information. And this expiration date can either be populated manually or through fixed processes within our model lifecycle that actually provide that kind of information. And then, we've also talked about, operational overviews where we can actually see if there's actually different items that we need to actually look at. You can see right here, we're looking at severities issues, but if we bring them up, we're just have information at this time. So we can see things like a new model was deployed on an engine. There was a new runtime engine actually brought up. We can see all that information, as well as about any of the batch jobs that we actually had running as well. So, we can track those if you have deployed models that run in batch mode, because that's a very valid thing for like daily reports and things like that as well. So, we have that kind of information, as well as an overview just of like all of the items that actually need to go in attention if there was any model lifecycle issues, which I don't have on here, but we can see all of our different model lifecycles that are actually currently running and defined within our system. And then when we actually want to dive into one of those, we can actually see the individual detail that's actually there on that, as well as, we can see, oops, I hit the wrong button. One second. It's getting a little funky on me there. You can actually see kind of the information there. So I'm trying to get about what is actually running within production right now. I do want to point out that any of the given models we actually have, when you get into it, you can look at it. You can see the versions we actually have deployed. You can see if there's actually the details about the model we actually have in there, so we can see all of the custom metadata you can add to it, as well as where the model's coming from as well, and any of the actual kind of details of the actual individual details of about, like, if we're running monitors on this system, what it's actually been run, what's those results that we actually see here that actually comes out of the monitors. So, we can run these standardized monitors we have. We have a ton of them out of the box. And we'll be looking at all of these in more detail as we go through it today. But I did want to kind of give you a brief look at the massive changes and new features we've actually added in this new release of 3.0, and what we will be using for the entirety of this Masterclass series. So this is just the brief look today. Obviously, in the next class, we'll actually be very much looking at kind of this compliance view, where how do we populate this information? How do we actually get there? How do we generate model documents, and how do we bring that all together? So I really hope you will join me in the follow-on classes, where we dive into these deep, and you'll get look behind the curtain, so to speak, and actually how you would really implement this within your organization, so you can see these meaningful results at the highest level within your organizations as well. With that, I'm going to pass it back just for a minute here, and then we'll be taking some questions. Absolutely. I'm going to take the first question here is, can you use SHAP or Lime or both for model explainability? The answer is yes. I actually had that in the demo briefly there. We'll be showing more on that. We run in an actual pluggable fashion. So when you add a monitor or a standardized test, we treat them just like any other model in our system. They're flagged as a special monitoring model or standardized test model, but you version them and control them, etc. So anything that can run on one of our runtimes, which includes Python, R, PFA, PMML, a whole bunch of technologies, Java, etc., we can actually incorporate into our systems and actually capture those results from that system. Out of the box, we do have SHAP and Lime on that for explainability, but we know there will be new technologies. Without having to version the product, you will be able to bring those into our solution and use them as is. You just have to tweak the output to be a standard JSON record, and we'll be able to capture that information, and you will be able to action on it with the SID tables as well. So moving on to the next one, we had do you provide a full model lifecycle management methodology template like the one you showed for MRM, but obviously larger scope? Answer is yes, absolutely. We use very simplified ones in the demos to make them easier to follow along, because otherwise it becomes an eye chart. When we get to actual implementations, we often see where it can go through like a staging environment, then pre-prod, then prod, and then moves it through all of those, or model risk processes that are much more in-depth and include maybe promoting it into a basically staging environment where you interact with it and ensure performance, for example, and things like that. Or, and when I mean performance, I mean live, like response performance times and things like that. So yes, things, and we provide a base. It's very easy with any standard BPMN editor. It's a BPMN is standard notation. Of course, we have tons of additions to that, but BPMN allows for that. So we provide delegates and services and external tasks and et cetera, all out of the box that you can actually use to provide that. Or more importantly, if you already have standardized systems you need to communicate, if they can speak REST, SOAP, standard kind of protocols, you can pull information into there, or pull information out of there or push it into there, and actually kind of integrate with those investments you've already made. So, and then those just actually can deploy right from many different tools or be uploaded as a file, and they can actually be versioned as well. So if you have things in flight in an old version and you bring in a new one, it'll actually only new tasks will follow the new one, so you don't end up with dangling reference, things like that. So absolutely, we can do that as well. And then let's see, you mentioned Jira tickets triggering, how it integrates with other Atlassian tools, organization of document flow. Yeah, we do Jira ticketing. We talk to Jira on that kind of things. To be clear, Jira is not our only tool. We also do things such as ServiceNow and other ticketing systems as well. And then basically, how we integrate with that is we have the ability to create Jira tickets, monitor Jira flows, and all that kind of things. We can also push documents into and out of Jira, et cetera. So, we provide integration from the ticketing side on that kind of standpoint. So the idea being, let's say you need somebody to go review a document that we generated, rather than trying to send an email and have them come to our system or something. Typically, we would create a Jira ticket, attach the actual document that needs to be reviewed, or the exception report or something like that. And then we would wait until it actually hits certain exit states you tell us to listen for. And then the Jira ticketing system can do whatever flows it wants. And, that can go through 6 layers, 20 layers, whatever you want to do. It could trigger other things. And, Jira can do what it wants, but finally it'll hit an exit state on the ticket. And then we will resume at that point. And we can actually interact with things such as custom fields. We can put information in there, pull information out, reassociate back to the model. So we have a lot of capability. And of course, we, from the standpoint of, like for instance, Bitbucket and what they do there, to us, that's another version of Git, and we absolutely integrate with that as well on that kind of things. And we've done some integration with some of the CI/CD stuff as well. So we do that. We don't too tightly couple with anything. The idea is we want to let the Jira tools do what they do best. We'll hand it off when appropriate to them, and the way that you're doing it today. And then we'll pick up and resume and keep the process moving forward from then on out, down the rest of the process that actually needs to occur. So for instance, like it's an exception report, it would go to the Jira ticket. We'd wait until they said resolved or something, and then maybe we go on to a process where we actually go grab a new version of the model, or roll back or whatever. You can define what you want to do. So it really makes for a powerful integration between the two by letting the tools that do their best breed of things and not trying to replace it in our tool. That's our overall arching philosophy with the design of our entire product, is to not replace investments you've already made, but stand on the shoulder of giants and integrate where it makes sense and handle all the things and be the conductor of the orchestra across all these different tools where we actually make it happen. So another question we have there is the monitoring of models limited to AI ML models only? Can you handle traditional regression techniques as well? Absolutely. I mean, we definitely have, like I said, we do black box testing. So we're looking at the actual input output data. More importantly, certain tests only make sense with certain models. So, we can actually categorize which tests we actually should run on any given model based on the type of model, the type of data they provide to us, and that kind of things, and what makes sense there. That we all love to talk about AI and machine learning tool models and stuff like that, and they're definitely, the future trend and stuff. But if you look at any large organization, they have an enormous amount of traditional logistic regression models, random forest, or even Excel spreadsheets. Let's get real. How many business value items are actually coming out of a model defined in an Excel spreadsheet? It's real. This happens. People are doing this stuff, and you can't ignore those models within your organization. So what we do is we treat the models generically in a way as a black box, so that we can do the monitoring, we can have a consistent reporting, and run the correct tests for that given model across the different items. So, we have that ability. So everything you've seen here today will work with all of the different kinds of models, which we think is absolutely business critical on that. The question that we have here is, what do you mean by black box testing? Does it mean that you don't have a definite assessment measure or metrics? Black box testing literally means we're treating the model as a black box. We do not look inside the model at all. What we're doing is looking at the input data and the output data from the model only. So we don't need to know the mechanics of what goes on inside of there to understand things such as like concept drift. Let's say we don't even, it's something that's like, more of a recommendation engine or something. We can look and say, hey, compared to two months ago when this model was running, the predictions are vastly different than they used to be. We should probably look into this. Or things like data drift. The input data itself looks very different that's coming in. So it's probably time to reassess whether this model is still acting correctly or not. And you can combine all these different kinds, as never mind standard things like F2, accurate area under curve, and all those kinds of things. Feature stability analysis. All of these can be done without ever executing the model. And so that's what we mean by black box testing. And finally, I see do you have some standardized API underlying model services have to communicate with? Model service have to communicate with. I'm a little confused on what there for the standardized API. I think I know. You do not, for our system, you do not actually have to put anything into your models. They do, if you want to run it on our runtime, they have to conform, and you have to, by conform, I mean you have to export, for instance, a function that you tell us to call to score something. That can be any function. We pass you a data frame, and away you go. For models we deploy to Spark, for instance, if it's PySpark, and you just write it as PySpark. You don't actually put any ModelOps code inside of that model. Or a SageMaker model, it's a SageMaker model. You leave it as is. Unlike some other solutions, we do not require you to modify your code. Instead, we're the automation orchestration engine that pushes that forward. And then, as I said, because of the black box testing and stuff, we don't need to modify the code. We can just look at that. You provide us the references to where the current data goes, and then we can actually execute based on that. If you're talking about is our information accessible through an open API, the answer is yes. It's all REST, basically RESTful API with Swagger interfaces, etc. Our entire UI is built on that. So anything you do want to access, we do actually have a Python SDK to get to, as well as just the Swagger RESTful information you can use to basically pull information out of our system. Well, I see we've reached the end of today's time. So thank you, everyone, for the great questions, and thank you for spending the time with me today. As I said, next class, really going to be hands-on. We're going to be doing some coding even and stuff. So please join me for the next in the series.